So there I've given you now the terms that we're going to use for looking at the characteristics of the different groups. So we've got the vegetative terms and the reproductive terms. So now we're ready to look at the family traits that are so important in getting a hold on identifying plants. Well, we're going to start out in the sequence that you would find in the book that I suggested. The first family is the Ranunculaceae. This is the Buttercup family. The pistils can be anywhere from one to many, but always simple, never fused to one another. Now you'll notice in the chart here that I have some of the words in bold. So if you pay a special attention to those bolded characteristics and memorize those are the ones you want to look for. So when you go in the field and you see a plant, you want to start running through your head these bolded traits to see, does this fit, does that fit? And you can narrow down to a family pretty quickly. So always simple pistils in Ranunculaceae. Stamens are numerous, as you see in these examples. Now the petals are usually 5 to 10 in number, but not always just 5 or 10. They might sometimes be 6, 7, 8, whatever. I've got the term petals in quotes because some of the structures that look like petals are not necessarily petals. So that's why you have this variable number of so-called petals in the flowers. Now in the Buttercup shown here, there you see 3 petals. That's because I've cut away 2 of them. So there would be 5 petals in that flower. In the Meadow Rue, you see 6 petals. And in the Christmas Rose, you don't really see any petals or stamens because those have already fallen off. This is a fruit that's developing. So, sepals. Sepals, because sometimes they look like petals, are not always obvious. But if they don't look like the petals, then they will be obviously sepals. Okay, the leaves are lobed or divided in repeating sets of 3. So you have a leaf that, if it's compound, it will have 3 major parts to the compound leaf, and then each of those leaflets might be divided again into 3 more leaflets. Or you can have maybe a leaf that is simple but has 3 deep lobes, and each of those lobes has 3 major teeth, that sort of thing. So repeating sets of 3. So that is the Ranunculaceae. Next we have the Caryophyllaceae, or the pink family. In the Caryophyllaceae, there is 1 pistil which is compound, and generally with 3 to 5 sections. And in this illustration, you see there are 3 stigmas and styles coming off the ovary, indicating the 3 sections. Stamens are generally either 5 or 10, and I think in both these cases, the fire pink and the chickweed, there are 10 stamens. Petals are 5 and usually notched. Okay, again, petals are in quotes because botanists disagree whether these are really petals or might be some other structure that's modified, like perhaps stamens. But anyway, what looks like petals are 5 structures there, and they have a notch at the tip. The sepals are usually fused, and the leaves are opposite, coming off of swollen nodes, and the leaves generally are fairly narrow. These insets of the chickweed, you will notice these are actually fruits. So the fruits, because they're the developed pistil, also have 3 to 5 sections. In this particular case, it has 5 sections, and when the fruit opens, it leaves 10 little teeth at the tip, which you can see in this illustration. That is the Caryophyllaceae. Next is the Brassicaceae, or the cress family. In this family, the pistil is 1, and therefore compound, with 2 sections. So if you look at this picture of the money plant, I have an arrow pointing to one pistil in which the flower parts have just fallen away from it. And if you look carefully, you can see that the stigma has sort of two lobes. Now, the other arrow is pointing to a developing fruit, which is sort of flattened and thickened. There you see, again, at the tip where the stigma was, it has two lobes. As this fruit develops, the fruit walls fall away, leaving just the ribs that were part of the fruit and a membrane that connects the ribs, and along that membrane are where the seeds are attached. So that's very characteristic of this family, the cress family or the Brassicaceae. There are 6 stamens. There are 4 long ones and 2 short ones, which you can basically make out in this illustration of the money plant. So you see the 2 short ones sort of on the sides, tucked down a little bit lower between the petals. Petals are 4, and they usually are in a sort of cross pattern. So the word cress means cross. That's where the family gets its name, from the cross pattern of the petals, the 4 petals. There are 4 sepals, and these are usually separate. And the leaves are mostly basal and often lobed, and they often have a mustard, spicy odor or taste. So you're familiar with things like broccoli and cauliflower. These are all members of the cress family, so they have a mustardy taste, just like mustard does. Next family is the Violaceae, the violets. These are very attractive flowers. In them there is a single compound pistil with 3 sections. And as you can see in the developing fruit that's been sliced open, there are 3 sections but only 1 chamber. But you see that the ovules are sort of divided into 3 areas of that single chamber. The fruit is a 3-valved capsule with seeds along its walls. So as this fruit would develop, it would finally become large and dry and would split open with 3 sections. Stamens are 5 in number, and they usually wrap around the top of the pistil, sort of clasping it. There are 5 petals, and they form a face-like pattern, and generally the lowest petal, the one in the center on the bottom, has a spur or an elongated swelling that sticks backward, and that's where nectar is produced. There are 5 sepals, and these are more or less separate. The leaves are simple, and in many species they are basal. In other words, they're attached directly to the rootstock and not to an upright stem. So that is the Violaceae. Next family, Saxifragaceae, or Saxifrage family. Again, it has a single compound pistil, and this usually has only 2 sections in it. The ovaries are usually partly inferior, or sometimes there are a few cases where they're actually just barely superior. But what we have going on here is there is a floral cup that wraps around the lower part of the ovary, but not all the way to the top. Stamens are generally 10 in number, and they come off the top of the floral cup. Petals are 5. They are generally small and fairly narrow, and again come off the top of the floral cup. So, sepals are 5 on the top of the floral cup. The leaves generally in this family are basal, large, and usually palmately lobed. Next family is the Rosaceae. It's the rose family. In this case, we have 1 to many pistils, and they are usually simple pistils. Or in a few cases, like in the apples and their kin, you can have, say, maybe 5 pistils actually fused together into a compound pistil. The pistils are also surrounded by a floral cup or tube. not necessarily fused to pistils, but at least the pistils are surrounded by the floral cup or tube. The stamens are numerous, lots and lots of them coming from the top of the floral cup or tube. The petals are 5 from the top of the floral cup or tube. Now you probably are familiar with roses, and you say, oh, but roses have a lot more than 5 petals. Well, those are cultivated roses that have been manipulated genetically. So those don't really count here. So if you look at a wild rose, it's going to have 5 petals. The sepals are 5, and they also come from the top of the floral cup, as shown in both the blackberry and the rose. The leaves are alternate and at least toothed. So you think they're going to have notches, and sometimes the notches are so deep that they are actually compound leaves, as we have in the rose and many others. And they have obvious stipules, as you see pointed out at the base of the rose leaf. So that's the rose family.